Good afternoon. And good afternoon to everyone who is joining us on the internet. Today I will not be reading out of the first or second editions of the course, but will continue to read from the transcript of what I shared with Helen and Bill, which Bill typed up. I encourage you to read along, and again, don't get hung up on the differences that you see. The chapter we're on, the section we're on, is called Right Teaching and Right Learning. It helps, in order to understand right teaching, to know what wrong teaching is. And so let's consider this. When the point came where each of you decided, Father, I'd rather see it my way. I'd rather define everything myself. I'd like to play with the experience of being an authorizer myself, all by myself. At that moment, as I've said before, the first thing you noticed was that you were, for lack of better words, small, tiny. I even used the word pissant mortal, and that's not poisson, that's P-I-S-S-A-N-T. Not a water ant, not a sugar ant, not a red ant, but a piss ant. A piss ant, nothing. That was the first thing you noticed, was that your bigness, your universality, your infiniteness was missing. And what was the first thing you felt? Uneasy, because it was unnatural to the divine one that you were. And a more accurate word for uneasy was the word fear. You felt small, in other words, incomplete, and it was a fearful experience. What necessarily followed was that the only thing available for you to teach was fear, because fear was expressed in every single thought and utterance you had or made. What you necessarily had to teach everyone else was, quote, make me whole, unquote. Because being the divine one that you are, and not being able to abandon your capital S self completely, you knew that was your birthright, and therefore your fundamental need. And so it became your task to create equity, if you will. And equity could only be achieved by making others be responsible for your wholeness, your ease, your comfort, your abundance. And so naturally, everything that followed became transactional. it became your lifelong task to see to it that others made you comfortable, happy, successful, abundant, whole. Now, the simple fact is that only those others that you could reach in this way were those who likewise had decided to look at things in their own way. And so they made the same demands of you. And so everyone joined together in finding ways to hopefully bring about the greatest amount of equity without losing even more than you had lost by virtue of abandoning the Father. And that's why existence is a struggle. But I'm bringing this up because at the bottom line, what all of you are teaching, if you are not in a process of awakening, is transactional. Getting for getting, or getting for giving. I give you this, you give me that, and what you must give me must be equal to what I think I am losing if I give you something. Of course, fear does many things. It causes a sense of paranoia. It causes there to be lack of confidence, even though there might be justification for confidence. And so there is distrust. And as a result of distrust coupled with fear, one tends to, if he can get away with it, take advantage of his brother or sister and get more than the apparent cost of the loss of what is being extended to that brother or sister. And so everything becomes quite muddy. Mind you, this doesn't just apply to money. It applies to the sharing or extension of love, the sharing or extension of trust. It applies to human relationships. It truly finds its way into every corner of life experience. And this isn't right teaching. And the learning that occurs isn't right learning. The teaching and the learning accomplish one thing: the reinforcement of the human condition. The reinforcement of the empty experience of not being connected with one source, of not being fully, consciously aware of what you truly are. It's the result of abandoning the place of excellence in you and then imagining that you haven't abandoned it. It's miserable. And what's the way out? The way out is to shift from getting to giving. And to give from that place of excellence in you that up to this point you have chosen to block out of your mind. Because, of course, you have more important things to do, like survive in this miserable experience and make something wonderful out of it all by yourself, which is impossible. Right learning is never a matter of finding a way to be alone, separate from your source, and experience fulfillment. It is not a matter of improving the human condition without ever discovering that what you're calling the human condition is the divine state of being which you are blocking from your experience. Now, if fear and wrong teaching is coloring your every perception and therefore causes misperception to creep into every corner of your life, then obviously, if the shift from getting to giving is going to occur, then the attitude of gifting is going to have to reach every single itty-bitty corner of your life. The willingness to extend love and consideration and genuine caring will have to extend to the smallest insect, the most poisonous insect, the most ferocious beast, the plants, the trees, the clod of dirt, the rock, your brother and your sister and yourself. In other words, it's not complicated. You're either doing one of two things. You're either in a state of fear, engaged in getting, or you're in a state of peace, engaged in giving. Behaving in a way always that makes your brother whole, that makes your plants whole, that makes your world whole, that makes your business transactions identify your wholeness and the wholeness of another, without for a moment indulging in getting. Because you're willing to embrace as a fact the divine truth that wholeness is the nature of your being, because it's the Father's good pleasure to give you it all, the kingdom, That's your birthright. Because this is not your habit, it's something that you must use some self-discipline for. And you must practice it on purpose in order for it to be a conscious experience for you, which, as time goes, accumulates for you a background, a history, if you will, of conscious experience, of engaging in making your brother, your sister, and your world whole, until it becomes second nature to you. Because you see, as this habit begins to replace the old habit of getting, you begin to remember, this is what's normal. This is my birthright. This is my being. This is what I'm all about. And when that light bulb goes on in your awareness, it stops being a disciplined practice, and it just becomes you being yourself in an entirely new way from an entirely new place. But you won't get to that new place if you don't begin to consciously practice what to you at the moment seems to be unnatural. And to practice it with discipline, to practice it with commitment, and to be alert for the places where you are either bargaining for another to provide you with your wholeness, or you are dealing with another in a manner that gets more than the situation is worth and leaves your brother at a disadvantage. It feels risky when you're coming from the place you're coming to not leverage your well-being from your brothers and sisters and your world. We need fossil fuel so that we can drive our cars. And so it justifies raping the land and being unwise in the use of its resources. And you create imbalance. You leave everything less than whole. You leave things depleted because there wasn't enough love to give the attention needed to see that your behavior didn't cost the earth or you or anyone else anything. Thus leaving everyone in a position to continue with ease to experience natural abundance. You see, fear is the lesson that you all need to stop teaching. And love is the lesson that you all need to start being. I didn't say loving, being loving is the lesson you need to start teaching, because being loving is a behavior. It is time for you to be love. And in order to be love, you have to turn your front toward the altar instead of your back. And you need to inquire from a source other than all of the mutually agreed upon definitions that you and everyone else have securely established. But remember this, to the degree that fear has been the reason for your actions, then your actions will confirm their source, which is fear. And I know in many ways all of you say, well, I'm not that uncomfortable. You know, things could be better, but I'm not so uncomfortable that I really think I need to be as radical as you're talking about and shift from securing my best interests from my brothers and my world, and instead shift to extending my brothers and sisters and the world's best interests to them, and let that be first. Because that's the way I move out of fear. That's the way I re-access my experience of what I divinely am. And that's the way I wake up from the whole illusion of lack, tininess, of being solitary, isolated, and alone, and lonely, constantly trying to overcome that loneliness. You know, things aren't that bad for me to go to that extreme. The simple fact is, there is a different way to be than the way you are being. And I am here to talk with you about that different way of being. And not to confirm the way you have been being. And indeed, that is what the Course is here to illuminate as well. But the whole reason for illuminating it is so that you might come to a place where within yourself you decide to behave in a different way. Not think in a different way in the privateness of your mind, but to be in the world, and with your brothers and sisters in a new way that doesn't always secure your safety, but one which has as its motive to secure your brother's safety. Because whatever you do to your brother, you do to yourself. Whatever you extend to your brother, you are embraced by. Because you are what you be. And you can't be anything all by yourself. You've tried that. You've been there, done that, but you haven't stopped yet. See, I want you all to arrive at the point where you can say, been there, done that, It's out of my life. I know I don't need to do that anymore. Okay, we'll go to the book. God is not the author of fear. You are. You have chosen, therefore, to create unlike him, and you have made fear for yourselves. You are not at peace because you are not fulfilling your function. That's all. You're at odds with yourself. It isn't that you're not at peace because you've been disobedient and there's threat of punishment. The moment you act at odds with yourself, you try to do the impossible, and it's uncomfortable, but it's not a punishment. As I've said before, it's just your innate, capital S, sanity, providing you with the experience that you're attempting to do the impossible, and there's no fulfillment in it. God gave you, continuing, God gave you a very lofty responsibility which you are not meeting. Well, don't let that overwhelm you. Your lofty responsibility is to be the presence of love, which you are. He didn't give you pissant little egos a lofty responsibility. He didn't give who you think you are a lofty responsibility. And don't worry, who you think you are is not going to have to fulfill that lofty responsibility because you haven't for a moment been who you think you are. Who you divinely are has a natural, spontaneous inclination and impulse to be the fullest that you can be from that place of excellence in you. And that's utterly natural. And yes, it can be called a lofty responsibility. God gave you a very lofty responsibility which you are not meeting. You know this, and you are afraid. In fact, your egos have chosen to be afraid instead of meeting it. See? Well, I'm not really that uncomfortable. I'm not so uncomfortable that I would choose to do this radical thing that you're talking about. See, your egos have chosen to be afraid instead of meeting it. When you awaken, you will not be able to understand this because it is literally incredible. But another thing is that not only will you not be able to understand it, you won't give it a second thought because you will be so fully engaged in the joy of reflecting God and letting God be all there is of you, so that every single act, every single intent you have is a universal blessing that illuminates universally. That's where you will be. That's what you will be experiencing. And you won't even be trying to understand how on earth it is you could have looked at things the way you did before. Do not believe the incredible now. Any attempt to increase its believableness is merely to postpone the inevitable. The word inevitable is fearful to the ego, but joyous to the soul. God is inevitable.